Hi everyone, my name is Jen and this is Beast House of Plants, where we talk about all things houseplant and home design. Welcome back. So I have for you yet another episode of my new series, The Houseplant Alphabet, where I introduce you to some of my houseplants. We talk about my experience growing them, what conditions they're getting inside my home. I'm going to give you my usual disclaimer that I am not a plant expert. This is just my personal experience, and that disclaimer is going to be very, very true today, because when I show you this plant, ooh, it does not look good right now. So today's episode is going to be G is for Philodendron Gloriosum. So this is a plant that you've definitely seen on my channel before, but the last time you saw it on my channel, it was in its prime. It was beautiful and luscious and full, and it doesn't look like that anymore. And it's 100% like user error and just like me messing up on a couple of things, which we will discuss. It's a plant, it will be okay, it will recover and put out new growth, and it will look beautiful again, but it does not look beautiful right now. So keep that in mind. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the Philodendron Gloriosum, which I think is one of the most popular philodendron. It's definitely on the more expensive side of philodendron and can kind of be considered quote-unquote uncommon, although I don't think it's uncommon at all. I think it's actually fairly accessible. I think it's just expensive. But, you know, most people would categorize it in the uncommon or the rare philodendron or rare aroid side, although it's kind of neither of those things. But that's a different tangent. So this is the Philodendron Gloriosum. It is a crawling philodendron, which means it cannot climb up things, but instead it prefers to root at the stem directly into the soil. So if you see this stick here is not for climbing purposes. The stick here is just to keep it stable while it is still trying to get reacquainted to this new box before it can, you know, like truly develop a lot of roots as it starts to crawl. So the last time you saw this plant on my channel was when I repotted it into this pot, and it looked a little bit different the last time right after I repotted it, because this plant actually has multiple sections, or I split it into multiple sections, and then when I repotted it into the middle of the pot with one section going this way and one section going that way, and that, you know, would make a plant look much fuller. But I made a couple of mistakes, so this is what it looks like now. So the first mistake I made, which actually would be easier for me to show you on the other section, because I still have the other section. So the first mistake I made with this plant is I burnt the crap out of it. Oof, it looks very, very bad. So I got new grow lights a while ago now. I think a relatively like long time ago now, but I got the T8 lights that are underneath all of the shelves on my plant shelfy wall situation, and those lights are very, very good, but they are also very, very strong, and I think it was fine when the plant was just like on the shelf. But if you remember, I had the Philodendron Gloriosum in the IKEA box that also has like a raised foot. So then it was on the shelf, but also on a raised foot that was like this tall. So then the leaves got way too close to the strip lights, and it just burnt the crap out of it. There's pretty much sunburn damage on almost all of the leaves, but this leaf probably has the worst of it. And the thing about sunburn damage is that it doesn't show up immediately. It can kind of take a couple of days or even a week to show up, which really, really sucks, because obviously with something like this, you want to move it ASAP, but you know, it's hard to know that that's occurring if it doesn't show up immediately. So now I've become much more careful about what plants I place where on my plant shelf or my plant wall. I do have some plants that are getting a little bit tall, and I'm kind of running out of space to put the tall plants, so I might have to completely take the shelving down and then maybe only put up, so right now I have 4 shelving on the wall, and I think I have to take them down and maybe only put 3 up and put them with like a bigger gap between each shelf, if that makes sense. Just because a lot of my plants are growing and they're getting tall now, which is a good thing, but I also don't want them to get burned by the grow lights. So that's why usually when I talk about grow lights in my videos, I recommend the Scentsy grow bulb over the strip lights, just because I've never had any issues with like burning and stuff with the Scentsy grow bulb, even though I have a lot of plants that are quite tall where the Scentsy grow bulb is, so they are quite close to the bulb, but I've never had any burning. With the strip lights, I've had multiple plants get burnt. So yeah. Okay, so that was the first mistake, was I burnt the crap out of this plant, which at the end of the day is more of like a aesthetic issue than like, I mean, it does kind of affect the plant's ability to photosynthesize, you know, as well, because there are now spots on the leaf surface that is damaged, but it's not the end of the world. Like, a plant probably won't die because it got sunburned, especially if you move it relatively quickly. But the reason why I had to end up splitting the pot and why this one is now in terracotta is because I lost a couple leaves on this section, and I lost them quite rapidly, which for me almost is always a sign of root rot, because I am a chronic overwaterer. Like, I try really hard not to overwater my plants, to the point where I often now undercorrect and become an underwaterer, which annoyingly can also lead to root rot. If you chronically underwater your plants, the roots within the plant actually, I believe they like start to like shrink, or they just like aren't able to properly absorb water anymore. So then when you actually do water them, they take it as too much water. So anyways, this section had a little bit of root rot, so I had to pull the entire plant out. Thankfully, it was only this section that had root rot, and the other section is fine. There was 3 sections. This section was the section that had root rot. The other section was fine, and I had one more section that, because I was already splitting up the plant, I decided to try to grow it in LECA just to see if it would work. And unfortunately, I did not like growing it into LECA, just because it's a crawling plant, which I already have enough issues with trying to get it to be stable in soil. Like in LECA, it was like just flopping everywhere, so I really didn't like it. Also, the top of LECA dries out relatively quickly, and because this is a crawling plant that you put on the surface of your medium, you want the stem to be exposed. But a large majority of the root system was just always dry because LECA dries out so quickly. So I didn't like it, so I transferred that section back into soil. It's fine, it's still there. I didn't bring it because it looks like the other section, so I didn't see a need. But yeah, so those were my 2 mistakes. I sunburned it, and then I overwatered it. So now it looks sad, but I am almost positive that it will be okay and it will put out new leaves. This was a section that had root rot, so I transferred it into a terracotta pot, which I actually really don't like, because now I feel like it's drying out too much and drying out too quickly. So always watering is always such an issue with me. And I feel like that's like kind of like the thing that's the most basic and the most fundamental of plant care, is just like watering your plants. And it's really the part of plant care that I have the most issue with. Okay. I'm gonna hold this section because it's slightly prettier. So now that we've gotten all of the mistakes that I've made with this plant out of the way, I'm going to briefly give you my recommendations for plant care in a perfect world after lessons I've learned. Okay, so right now this plant has been moved to my east facing window. It has not grown since I moved it to my east facing window, but I think that has more to do with the fact that I repotted it twice in the past like 3 or 4 months than a lighting situation. I feel like my east facing window should be enough light for this plant. I'm going to reevaluate that later on if it still won't put out new growth at around the 6-month mark, but I can't put it on my plant shelf wall because the plant is too tall. So if it doesn't work there, then I'm gonna have to find another spot for it, probably under a grow light but a little bit further away. So that's something that I'm going to have to reevaluate later on, but the general recommendation for a plant like this is always bright indirect light. So either a really, really bright east-facing window or a south-facing window with the plant pulled a little bit away from the window. So yeah, that's for lighting. For watering, I don't really do anything spectacular or anything different with this plant. Since I moved it to this crawling horizontal box, I have had to water it a little bit less just because this box has more like space right now. Like this pot is significantly bigger than the root system and the plant at the moment. So when I water, I also don't usually water the entire box. I usually only water like half of the box because that's where the root system is right now. And then every once in a while I'll water the entire box so that the plant feels like it has something to search for and something to crawl towards. It's in my usual arid mix, which is mostly orchid bark and then coco coir pumice and horticultural charcoal. I definitely like the mix. Like before I repotted into this box, it was in the same mixture in just like a regular 6-inch nursery pot, and it was always putting out new leaves. So I know for sure that this mix is good. And the watering schedule, you know, it just needs to be adjusted for the size of the pot. So yeah, for humidity, I think this plant would like more humidity, but I don't think it is completely 100% necessary. I've always grown this plant in just ambient room humidity around 50% for me, and it was always putting out new growth just fine. I've never really stressed too much about putting this plant in a high humidity area. But with that being said, this is like a velvety arid, so it for sure would do better and perform better for you if you put it in a slightly higher humidity zone. So for propagation, this plant is like very easy to propagate because it is a crawling plant. And what being a crawling plant means is that you need to leave the stem exposed on the surface of the soil or the medium you're using, and just the roots are buried within the soil, which means that whenever the plant, so this is a new growth point right here, this red part, whenever the plant grows, you know, a new leaf and then a new section of the stem, it will always starts to root pretty much immediately as soon as it grows because it's already in contact with the soil or the medium. So it's really, really easy to propagate. So you would just cut, you know, in between 2 nodes, and it would likely have already been rooted for you. So that's a really, really nice thing about the Philodendron Gloriosum. I think in general though, I've realized that I don't love crawling plants. I have 2. I have this Philodendron Gloriosum and I have my Rhaphidophora decursiva. My decursiva was also repotted in the same video that I repotted this in. That is doing much, much better than this one is doing. It's doing great. But I just feel like crawling plants take up so much more space, and I just feel like it's easier to grow like a climbing plant, and I feel like I see bigger leaves on a climbing plant pretty much as soon as I put it on a moss bowl, right? Versus a crawling plant, you can't put it up anything to climb, so it's really just waiting for it to mature before it gives you bigger leaves. So yeah, I would really like to get my hands on the Philodendron Glorious, which is the Philodendron Gloriosum hybridized or crossed with the Philodendron Melanochrysum. I feel like that is a really, really pretty plant that has a lot of Philodendron Gloriosum features, but is a climber. So yeah. Alright, so I have ranted for long enough now. I think that's all I had to tell you about this Philodendron Gloriosum. I would highly recommend this plant though, if you want to get into kind of like velvety, Philodendron velvety earwards. I do think it is not that hard to take care of, despite the fact that mine looks like this right now. So yeah, alright, so thank you so much for watching this video. If you like it, give me a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye!